treating protesters, and she picked up night shifts for her neighborhood watch. She's also a COVID survivor, and she has spent much of her free time battling misinformation about the disease online. Agatha Lamin grew up in the village of Coribundo in Sierra Leone, and now she lives in Coon Rapids and works as a nursing assistant at the Jones Harrison residence in Minneapolis. She came to the United States at the age of 20 as a refugee from Sierra Leone's civil war. Her father, Alfred, ran a community medical clinic during the war, and Agatha has followed his example during the pandemic, volunteering to work in Jones Harrison's COVID unit after the senior home's first 2 residents tested positive in early April, and she is studying to be a nurse at Anoka Ramsey Community College. So I think just to start off, I was hoping that you could both tell us each a little bit about your background and how you came to the nursing profession. And let's start with you, Jennifer.
Hello. I became a nurse later in life. It was a second career for me. I actually had a dear friend of mine who suffered a hemorrhage and later died in the hospital at the age of 29. And it was her family's talking about the way that nursing staff was with the patient, with her family, that really inspired me to want to be one of the good ones out there. So that was a catalyst, definitely. And then, of course, I had the support of my family. My mom is a retired nurse herself, and everybody around me was very supportive of this career change. And it was a calling, and I'm really happy that I did follow. Yeah. How about you, Agatha?
Like you said, it's a calling. I believe it's a calling for me as well. Growing up in a home where my father was a caregiver, worked so hard in his clinic, taking care of the wounded soldiers. Growing up, and during the war, I was fortunate to come over here to seek refuge. And I happened to find myself in this nursing field. I am so happy to be part of this team. Is in me, like you said. I grew up seeing my father doing it, so I think it's a calling for me as well.
Well, thank you for that. And I was hoping that you could take us back to the first weeks and months of the pandemic, and just sort of what was it like to be a nurse at that time? How did you balance your personal safety and your professional responsibilities amid so much uncertainty? And sort of what were your biggest fears at that time? And just sort of what was it like at the beginning? Let's start with you, Agatha.
Zac, it was scary. I was shaking. I could find myself crying in the car, driving, crying. And I have my daughter living with me, my 20-year-old, and I was hiding from her because the whole pandemic of a thing came with a fear. None of us know what is going to happen next. Everything about the pandemic was death, and that the disease is so contagious that, you know, you're going to spread it and people are going to die. And I have my daughter living with me. I could cry driving. But like I told you before, I have to do it. It was a voluntary. I was like, how am I going to leave my people? They are mine. They were mine before this pandemic. They were mine before they got sick. I can't turn my back away from them.
And you were one of the few nursing assistants who really, you were given a choice and you chose, I'm going to work on the COVID war.
Yes, I said I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Yes. I said I'm going to work on this unit. There is no way I could turn my back away. And I could remember some of my other colleagues who tell me, why are you doing this? Is it because of the money? I'm like, what? Money? The increment is just $3. You can compare $3 to my life, but I cannot turn my back on these people suffering and being in this kind of. And I prayed about it, and it was okay. I never got sick. Well, maybe I did, I didn't know, but I took care of the people, and I was never positive all through the time of testing. I was never positive till today. Yeah.
How about you, Jennifer?
At the beginning of COVID, it was scary. It was also exciting. You're connected to the world with a shared experience. And so in that respect, it was kind of a bonding experience for healthcare workers worldwide. But then the newness wore off, and that wore off really quickly. There was so little information at the beginning, and what information we had was fragmented, and then information was coming in from everywhere, and it was hard to sift through and know what was accurate, know what was the latest information. And so there was fatigue from that. And then, of course, just the donning and doffing of PPE over and over and over throughout the day. The newness of that wore off and definitely left with some monotony there. And I guess just learning to watch people die in that respect was something that was new. To see people die at that rate and that frequency, all from the same disease, was something that was very, very new, and it was hard for us to watch.
Yeah, what was that like for you, Agatha? Just sort of, because I know facing death is sort of part of the day-to-day reality, sort of even in normal times. But just what's that like in the personal level this last year?
In my setting of where I work is a nursing home, so it's like I have been with them, with my patient. They are like family to me, and watching them suffer in that agony. The fever, the high fever, the changing of colors, the death, it was really heart-rending. And I'm also thinking about myself or whosoever I could come in contact with. I don't know if I'm carrying, I could be one of them spreading it. I don't know. So cleaning has been mine. And I remember I could go cry, take off my gloves and cry and wash up and come back again. I have to come to do it, to help the people, because I actually saw, like in the setting of a nursing home, I take care of those people every day, all the time. So that my setting is kind of, it's like home. And then these are the same people that I see suffering and dying in my face. It was heartbreaking. It is still now.
I think one of the most poignant deaths that I can remember was a man who was on the ICU and just hours before had denied our request that he go on a ventilator. And a few hours later, I held his hand as he passed away, and seeing the light fade from his eyes and knowing that this is the reality of the disease, that we have absorbed this reality as nurses. And we have different ways of dealing with it. I know in a lot of the break rooms, we had wish lists written out with our desires. Should we be put on a ventilator? Everything from the kind of music that we wanted played to the authority to have other people pluck our chin hairs. You know, you have to find some humor in it somewhere, but also this was the reality. We knew that our coworkers were going to be getting it. We had several coworkers who got very ill, very, very ill. You know, just, I got COVID. And that was something that was terrifying for me. But it wasn't, my biggest fear about COVID myself wasn't that I was afraid of dying. It was afraid that I'd passed it on to somebody else. And the magnitude of responsibility that goes along with that is something that changed me at that point. And so it is scary. It's scary when you have it. It's scary when you don't have it. It's scary thinking that you can pass it on to somebody else. It's scary when there's people out there who don't believe that there was a pandemic while Agatha and I are watching people die. The fear, I think, was probably the biggest part of the year that was hard to set down.
I remember coming home and I could tell my daughter not to come closer. And I have all those spray. I was spraying all and the doors and everywhere. She lived downstairs and I live upstairs in a townhome. And I could push her, don't come, but I don't want to really tell her what's going on where I work. Until one day she's asking me, Mommy, what's going on at your job? Be careful, you are picking all those hours for this disease going on. And I told her, no, we don't really have it there. I lied to her. She was like, don't lie to me, Mommy, it's on the internet. All right. Yeah, but it was a scary thing, very, very scary. in the beginning.
Hmm. And was there an interaction with a specific patient for you, Agatha, that has really stood out in your mind, or sort of like a connection you've made that you'd be open to sharing?
Yeah, I have one particular patient in the first time that they said was positive to the COVID, and she's a caring person, always giving hugs. I can find myself in her room most of the time, spending time with her. And she was the very first person that they said. And I actually, around that time, I thought I had it because this is my body. We were almost together all the time. And I could find myself crying, and I was terrified, seriously terrified. And my patients, those that were that survived the COVID, going out from the COVID unit will give me a hug and thank me a lot. And I still have a little card of one of the family member, specifically wrote my name and mail it to me. And I'll keep that as a treasure. Is so, with a thank you, but with my name that she could remember. The mom could remember to give my name to her, and she sent that card to me in the mail.
Agatha, you brought up a really good point about family members, and that's something that we forget about right now, but was so very difficult with COVID, is that there were no visitors in the hospital.
No.
None. And so some of these patients are in the ICU on a ventilator for months, or hospitalized for longer. And so part of what we would do as nurses, of course, is updating family many times per day, but then taking iPads specifically designated for this purpose, setting them up on FaceTime or Zoom calls in front of the patient, even though the patient can't speak or react in any way, just for the family to be able to lay eyes on them. I can't imagine how hard that would be to not be able to be there, especially for somebody who is that sick. And that definitely is something that impacted me in the time of COVID, is how, as a healthcare worker, you are sometimes the only touch that this person is going to get for months. The only person who's going to lay hands on them, and that's with gloves on. The only person who is going to be within reach of this person is you. And that's a lot, that's a very important role to play,
Yes.
to be there for the patient, to be there for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it was new. It was like how teachers had to learn to deal with teaching from afar. We had to learn to deal with family members from afar, and how hard that was. It was a challenge for nursing staff, because we did get a lot more phone calls, and that means less time spending in the room with the patient. But at that same time, I can't imagine how hard it would be to not be there for the one who needed the most. So
Imagine how hard it was for those loved ones that they could not be there to hold the hands of their loved ones passing away. And we have to do it. Yeah, we became the family members, we became the caregivers.
Yeah,
We were
the
there.
scientists, the explorers, the researchers.
Yes.
And just could you speak a little bit more to just sort of like the physical toll it takes to like do this week after week, and sort of what that's been like? Just in terms of like the equipment and everything.
Well, from my perspective, I work in the ICU. Well, I'm a float nurse, so I work all over the hospital, but mainly during COVID, in the ICU. And for our ICU, it was completely filled with COVID patients on ventilators, and it spilled over to the next ICU. So it was just ventilator after ventilator after ventilator. And that means that we had a lot of patient care. You have to stay on top of the sedation medication, because you can't be on a ventilator without some sort of medication to make it more comfortable. You can, but not for very long. So maintaining those medications, maintaining lung health, so having to suction lungs. We don't realize how often we actually cough, clear our throat, but it's many times per hour. And so for patients who are on a ventilator, they can't do any of that. So we actually manually have to help them clear their lungs. And this has to be done at least every 2 hours, if not more often. And with COVID patients, congestion in the lungs does happen more often. So that
And
is
how many patients did you have at the height of the pandemic, Jennifer?
in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
we were full.
But how many would you treat personally?
Oh, in the ICU, it is typically 2 patients to nurse. So I've got 2
Mm-hmm.
patients on a ventilator to every nurse that's there. If they're on ECMO, which is basically life support, it's typically 1 nurse per patient. But again, sometimes we did have a few shortages, but for the most part, it is 2 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the PPE was a blessing, but that PPE takes my breath away anytime I'm going home, I'm going to work. Because we have to put one clothes over our own clothing, and then we put another one over going into the patient's room. Now we have 2 masks to put on, the N95 and the surgical mask. And then we have the goggle, then we put the shield, then we put like 3 gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to cover our hair.
Mm-hmm.
And then we put the boot over the shoes that you have. Oh my goodness. To go through all that for the day.
Yes, and different set for every patient and
And
every
different set for every patient.
into the room. So with very busy patients, sometimes you're putting on a PPE 50 or 60 times in a shift. Hopefully not that much, but it is absolutely possible. It did absolutely happen. And that is a lot of times to be putting on and taking off all of that PPE. And it is.
And Jennifer, when you have the PPE on, you can't think of bathroom even. You cannot think of that.
Or if you have a hair in your mask, you can't do anything about it because your gloves
Anything.
are contaminated, the room is contaminated, the air is contaminated. You just have to deal with it until you're out of the room.
It was the PPE was a blessing, but again,
A curse.
it was heavy. But we have to protect ourselves and protect others.
Correct. Yes.
And then just you guys mentioned this a little bit earlier, but just what has the misinformation about this virus been like for you, and just about dealing with this while seeing all this misinformation out there, and how have you addressed that, and how have you felt about that?
To me, I could say it was a guesswork. Nobody really knew what the pandemic was about. We're all just guessing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really know how it's spreading, what is going on. So it was just all guess.
I'll be the first to admit that when COVID first came out and we were hearing about it on the news, I did say, it's just a flu. Why is everybody getting so worried? I said that. I'm a nurse. But that's the cool thing about information and about science, is the more we learn, the more we should change our viewpoints to match that which we know to be true. So there was so much information out there and so much misinformation out there that it was so difficult to sort through and determine which was appropriate. And then once you have determined that this is appropriate information, then to try to dispel any of the misinformation out there was, of course, a challenge. And it is still a challenge. But to that, I say, follow the science. Put your faith in evidence-based research. And again, it's okay to change your mind when you have new information. And I think it's really important to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. And then just what has this, what sort of toll has this year taken on you personally, just in terms of at an emotional level of doing this, and just sort of how has that been?
Me personally, I mean, we are resilient. We cannot continue at that pace indefinitely. But on top of this pandemic, which has been obviously a global concern and still is and will continue to be for some time. But on top of that, this is also the location of the murder of George Floyd that happened in this city here, 3 blocks from where I live. And that on top of this has added so much insult to injury this year on what we have had to deal with as healthcare workers in the city. We've had moral distress that has come from not being able to provide the proper care that we want to our patients, the moral distress that comes along with seeing social injustices. So this year has taken a toll. But with every, with every toll comes a silver lining in that we are learning. We're learning what we can deal with. We're learning what we can't deal with. We're learning what is important to us as a society and what is important to us as healthcare workers, and also what is necessary for the continuation of healthcare in this community and in this society. So these are big things that have come from this pandemic, and also just from the social injustices we've witnessed in this past year.
I have some religious background. So when things like this happened, like during the war, it wasn't by my own power or understanding or anything how I passed through it to where I am today. So when it gets to the point of too much, I just flow in it. And that has always helped me out, because it gets to the point I cannot handle it. It's not my understanding. There is nothing I can do to help it. I just let it in the hands of God and let it flow. That was how I went through mine, because it was really too much.
Yeah.
That I cannot do anything. I have no power for it. My understanding or my thoughts or thinking or nothing will help me out. So mine was just to pray about it and go through it.
And this is a year where a lot of both of your coworkers have left the profession, have gone under, have had some severe mental health strains.
Sick. Yeah.
And just what's that been like for you, just sort of being in a workplace where that's the environment?
It was a scary thing, but like I said, I just found myself, I just don't know how I really did it. If you could check the hours I put in, that time was really much. Too much hours. 16 hours, and I don't know. I can't tell you how I did it, honestly.
So what was most likely the day that I was exposed to COVID was at work. And I had said to my coworker that day, this was back in October, I had said to her, I guess I wouldn't really mind getting COVID for a little bit, because I could just use a 2-week break right now. I was so exhausted from PPE fatigue, from the new way we had to deal with family members, from the new disease, from just the toll that it takes to care for that sick of patients for that long of time. I was burnt out, and you've got to be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. But it was something that really did take its toll on us, not just physically, but also mentally, to see that, and also to have so much pushback from certain groups saying that this is not a pandemic, that this is a political issue, that this is something other than what it is, which was a terrible, terrible disease. And that is heartbreaking right there. And having to deal with that on top of what we see every day, the horror of what we see every day, the terror of what we see in the neighborhood, and to come home and say that it's all a fantasy, that was devastating, I think, on a personal level. But just knowing that we are doing the right thing, and that we are, making a difference, hopefully at least to one family member, if not to one patient, if not to our community as a whole. And you just got to keep going. Just got to keep doing it.
How did you, what was it like to have COVID as a healthcare worker and as somebody with that experience, Jennifer?
You know, I want to say knowledge is power, but it's also very dangerous too. So I have asthma, and my biggest concern was, am I going to be able to breathe? Which should be every human being's biggest concern. Can I breathe? And so I have a pulse oximeter at home, and a pulse oximeter is what we use to measure how much oxygen is in your blood, as well as how fast your heart is beating. And so my pulse oximeter on a healthy adult, it should be in the high 90s, 97 to 100. And mine never got lower than 93, which is very low for a healthy adult. But I felt like I couldn't breathe very well. I felt like I wasn't getting enough air to sustain myself. And that was very scary. When you feel like you're not getting enough air, your body's natural response is to panic. So trying to fight the panic was challenging, but it was scary knowing what was in front of me. It was scary knowing what was happening to my lungs. It was scary knowing what could potentially happen to me, and what would it be like if I was the one lying in that bed. So that probably added an extra layer of fear of knowing what the disease looks like from that side. But I was also grateful that the people that I work with are amazing. The doctors that I work with, the respiratory therapists, the other nurses I work with, even, I mean, healthcare assistants, and even the people who clean those rooms, because I can't imagine how hard and fatiguing that must have been to deep clean the rooms that often. And I couldn't have done it without those people. I could not have done it. And I knew that even if I did get terribly sick, I have this wonderful group of people around me who are going to lift me up, and they're going to do everything they can to make me better and to help me live. And that gave me at least a little bit of relief.
And how has it felt when patients have recovered during this time for you? And just sort of what have you sort of stayed in touch with any recovered patients, or have you been able to form any of those bonds?
Oh yes, I, like in my setting is a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I work on the Alzheimer's unit, even though most of my patients could not remember that this has happened, because most of them could ask you, why are you having that mask on? And those were people that were on the COVID unit. But yeah, that communication is still there, the bonding is there, but most of them really did not know what went on, because I work on the Alzheimer's unit.
Did that make it feel sort of like you were more alone in that sense?
No, I wasn't like alone, because there were some, the administrative in my building was so much involved. So you cannot feel alone, you can't, because they were so much into it. With the admissions, taking the recovered patient out from the unit, coming to check with us and all that. I never felt alone, no. I wasn't.
And just what lessons do you hope to take from the last year plus of the pandemic, either in terms of how you do your work or in your personal life?
The lesson, we have to really learn to know more about disease. Because like this thing that happened, the pandemic, most of us really did not know much about it and what was going on and all that. So I think we have to more be able to do some research and know more about disease and stuff and how to handle it. Because when you know, then the fear is not too much. And fear can paralyze. Something you could able to do so very well, you could not do it because of the fear have overcome you. So if knowledge is power, like Jennifer said, even though it could be dangerous, but knowledge is power. So if we get to know more about this disease and stuff, we will be confident to handle it when it comes. that fear will not be there and overcome us and paralyze us and make us so panic, like we don't know what to do, or we don't know where to start or what is happening and all those things.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the research portion of it. I mean, again, there will be new diseases in the future. There will be new challenges that we are going to face as a society that we haven't faced before. And we need to follow the science. We need to see what is going to, where the disease goes. We need to study it. We need to put our faith in those who base their entire careers off of this. So when it comes to vaccination, when it comes to disease research, these are important things. We need to be able to trust our scientists, believe the scientists, and hold them accountable for the information that they put forth. And as that information changes, we need to follow that as well. That is probably got to be the thing that I'm going to take most out of this pandemic academically, is that following the science and putting that faith in evidence-based research has to be the number one thing for me.
And I was just wondering, do you guys have any questions for each other?
Oh, let's see.
Not to put you on the spot.
Sure. Agatha, who do you think during, these trying times was an unexpected person who maybe helped you along or just lifted you up?
During this pandemic, my fellow co-workers,
Anybody?
those that, those that who were really in it, not like those that quit on us
Nah.
with the fear, but we that were there, we are supportive to one another. There is this one lady that we worked together constantly all the time. And like I mentioned earlier, with my belief and stuff, I have this olive oil that I believe is blessed and anointed. So when I wash my hands and I will put my olive oil, and I said, no germs will come in these hands. That's my belief. And she was laughing at me. She was really laughing so hard with this thing. And then I remember one day she said, where is that your anointing oil? Bring it here, let me just. So anyhow, we were uplifting one another. We could not be so serious all through the day. We have to make some humor, create some jokes, laugh about it, because we don't have to be serious all through. The whole thing is scary. It's too serious for you to be too serious in it. So we have to throw some jokes. And that was uplifting. It
Good.
helps the spirit. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Any other jokes you'd want to share?
None that I could probably share because things get pretty real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was the day of the verdict of the Derek Chauvin trial. I had worked that day, and when I came home from work, parked a car and immediately walked down to the George Floyd Memorial. And it was such a different day than the day before. The day before it was all quiet and there was hardly a soul in sight. And this day there was a band playing. There were thousands of people just dancing, hugging, crying. And this one man walked up to me and he thanked me for my service. I was still wearing my scrubs. And I couldn't believe in that moment of everything that had happened in this past year, especially with George Floyd, that someone would take the time out of this wonderful celebration to come up and say thank you. And that was one of the moments that will probably stick through on this pandemic to me, was just that small step out of a comfort zone to say thank you was so unexpected that it brought me to tears at that time, especially considering everything else going on at this moment. Mm-hmm.
I could imagine that with you, because remember in the beginning of this whole pandemic, it get to a point we were considered the ones spreading it. And some people were against us. You cannot go in the public with your scrub.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You cannot go in the public with your scrub because people were against you, accusing us, the healthcare workers, of spreading the disease. So for that time, for somebody to come up to you and say, thank you for your service, I could imagine that it means a lot.
Yes, it certainly did. And there were actually a whole lot of people this past year, and it was really tough. And I think that sometimes I didn't admit how tough it was or how not well I was dealing with things, because it's difficult when you don't have your support group near you, as they weren't during the pandemic. You can't really set it down. You've just got to keep carrying all of this around with you at all times. And there were so many people that came through in big ways and small ways, whether it was, the neighbor making a meal across the street, or a group of friends that got together for a surprise Christmas present. This past year did bring out a lot of the worst in people, but it also brought out a lot of the best. You saw a lot of really good things this year. You saw a lot of people come together, and you saw a lot of people care in ways that you never expected your neighbors to do. And it was amazing. Yeah, I'm going to take that with me too.
And when it comes to the vaccine, a huge relief.
Yes.
Big relief. I got my vaccine the first time, my hand were heavy and felt sick a little bit. The second one really was harder than the first one. But the feelings that came in me after that vaccination, I just felt like it's over.
Like a 16-year-old with your driver's
Yes, I felt so good. And I can tell you this, there was a time the governor came to our facility, and he had a press conference there. And I was choosing to come and say something. I was so panicked, Jennifer. Imagine the governor. He's like the president of this, our own state.
Yeah.
And who am I to stand next to the governor? I was shaking, I was excited, and I was lost of words. My English could not come out.
I think my English might have failed me at that point too. But yeah,
I felt so blessed that, I could be chosen. One, and then he acknowledged that I worked on that COVID unit, and that thank you. And his mother was also a caregiver, he said. And he said to me, "Can I take a picture with you?" I said, I could have asked for that. And it was really nice. I felt so good.
That's good.
Even though my English could not come out, with the nervousness.
So Zac, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So as you have been reporting on Voices from the Pandemic, is there any sort of theme or thread that you have noticed amongst the people that you have spoken with?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd say no, not really. I mean, I think it's really been, because I started with this pandemic, and we had a retired couple, Ron and Arminta Miller, and they live in a senior home. And at one point, Arminta actually contracted COVID, and she told us this, but she had no effects. And so, I think they had just a very different experience. I think we had some people who have had just absolutely devastating experiences, and it's just been really different per person, I think. So I think that's the strange thing about this pandemic. We all have been in lockdown. We've all been quarantining, but it's just affected everyone so differently. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So I know you've talked about just sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was a lot of like frontline workers are heroes. There were clapping in the street. I think you mentioned, Jennifer, that sort of died down after a while. And just sort of, how do you feel about sort of the turning healthcare workers into heroes in general, and just sort of how is that in terms of how I think maybe there's some conflicted feelings about sort of that type of support, and just how do you process that stuff?
I mean, it's the word hero is kind of, that's a pretty big word. Do I think Agatha is a hero? Absolutely. Do I think I'm a hero? No. No. And this little piece of artwork behind me that my friends had gotten, and it says my name at the bottom and hero. And it feels like, oh no, that seems like a lot. It seems like a big honor to carry, too big of an honor for what I'm doing. But at the same time, this is why we became healthcare workers, was to physically and emotionally touch people when they need it the most. And that is what we do. That's our calling. That's our job. You know, do I think we're heroes because of it? I mean, that's not my call. That's not my intention. That's not where I go with that. But where I do go is I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all of the people that did come forward and yeah, that support the clapping in the street. That didn't last, but that's never the intention for why we became healthcare workers in the first place. So yeah, it was nice to be honored.
Well, thanks. And is there anything else you wanted to share, either of you, tonight, or anything else you think people should understand about sort of what you've been through?
No, I would just say that thank you everybody who wore a mask, who got vaccinated, who reached out to a healthcare worker or just somebody who looked like they were struggling and offered whatever you could for help. That means the world. And just, I don't think that part should ever go away. I think we should keep doing that to our neighbors and to our coworkers and to even strangers. And that part of the pandemic, that's something that we need to learn, you know, as a humanity. That's a good thing. Let's keep doing it. Yeah.
And I want to join Jennifer to thank everybody that actually joins hands with us all to fight this pandemic. It was a battle. Yeah, even though the mandate has been there to take off our masks and stuff, but it's still out there. And we just try to encourage everybody, take your vaccines, do the precautions. Let's continue the fight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for coming and for sharing your stories over the last year. And I know it's been such an emotionally draining job at times, and I think it's difficult to share so publicly, and I appreciate you're doing so. Does anyone have questions they'd like to ask at this time?
I have a question for Jennifer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hey, Jen, it's Patty Bloom.
Hi.
Hi there. Wondering, after your frontline medic, you know, during the initial protests, and then the neighborhood watch, you know, the 24/7 kind of a thing that you were doing, I know that those stress levels had to have been really horrible. Has that gotten any easier for you, or do loud noises and stuff still trigger some PTSD?
Well, that's a loaded question. Yeah. No, that's good. Has it gotten better? Yes, it does. Definitely has gotten better. Although when I went from that, especially over the winter when things kind of quieted down just a little bit, especially in the neighborhood, I went from being on constant survival mode to going back to regular life. And I discovered that transition was a little bit more difficult than I had anticipated. So, for example, you know, I was on a boat with my father and a helicopter took off and I hit the deck because
It's a privilege. I am so grateful that I could be part of this history, and I am grateful. Thank you. And I'll be in the Hennepin Museum history. It's all just happening to me. I'm excited. Thank you all.
What was that, Kathy?
I'm Jenny's mom, and I am very proud of her.
Ooh.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Jen.
Well, I think ending with Jennifer's mother is a great way for us to sign off. Thank you all so much for coming, and be well. Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.